This is Gen Z, a podcast that explores Generation Z, who they are, how they're different from other generations, while also being an incredible blend of those who came before them. We explore what they think is cool, what moves them, and why they do what they do. I'm your host, Meghan Grace. If you've been following along this season, you know we've talked a lot about the shift towards in-person events and fourth spaces. You know, those interest-based, values-aligned communities where Gen Z is gathering offline. Today's guest brings a fresh lens to that conversation, one that's rooted in what happens when we reimagine influence culture. Andrew Roth is back with us for his third episode appearance. He's the founder and CEO of dcdx, a Gen Z research firm that has brought insights for brands like Hinge, Spotify, L'Oreal, Eventbrite, and Crocs. He was recently named one of Forbes 30 Under 30 in marketing and advertising, and his work has been featured across the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, BBC, and Fast Company. Most recently, Andrew and his team launched Offline, a new venture spun out of dcdx that connects brands with real-life communities that isn't just a brand activation play. It's about cultural intervention. It's reshaping how trust, influence, and community are showing up together. dcdx's research found that 70% of Gen Z feels exhausted by keeping up online, and that fatigue is fueling real action. In just a few months, Offline has helped brands reach 1,100 in real life event attendees, generate over 90,000 minutes of in-person engagement, and spark over 600,000 impressions, all through community-hosted spaces built on authenticity, not just algorithms. This one is a good one with a great guest, so let's get into it.
Welcome to The Human Role, your go-to podcast where HR and payroll collide with innovation. I'm your host, Tiana Neal, and every month I'm diving deep with industry experts and changemakers, bringing you real talk insights, practical tips, and fresh takes you won't hear anywhere else. Whether you're a leader, practitioner, or just curious about the latest HR and payroll trends, I've got you covered. Ready to roll with the best? Tune in for fresh perspectives, actionable tips, and the knowledge you need to roll forward with confidence. Subscribe now and let's transform the way you work.
Per usual, I only get to hang out with cool people and friends or people I've met and happen to become my friends. But in this case, this is a friend that I've known for a little while and a third time repeat guest. We were just kind of talking about that. But I'm very excited to welcome back Andrew Roth to the conversation. And a little context, if you're just tuning in for the first time with me and Andrew, I've known Andrew since like 2018 when you were an undergraduate. I was thinking about that. And your third appearance on the show. And excited to have you back and learn more about what you've been working on. But Andrew, it is always so good to see you.
Likewise. Thanks for having me back. I can't really remember what was going on in 2018, but it feels like a long, long time ago, pre-COVID. Actually, I do know. I really remember the room I was sitting in when we interviewed. So there you go. But yeah, come a long way.
Yeah, and I remember I got like this email from you as a student. You're like, hey, I like Gen Z stuff. I was like, oh, me too. And then we hung out and we were both at Vanderbilt, and then you graduated and now you're running a whole business, which you were technically kind of running a business while you were in college, which is so Gen Z of you. But give us just a little summary about what you're doing today and maybe some of the things that have evolved in your work since we last chatted. Because last time we chatted, you were really, I think you had just gotten dcdx into its form or more modern form, and you were kind of building that out. But give us a little rundown of some of the stuff y'all have been doing and where you've been taking your work recently.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we have, in our research on Gen Z, I mean, we've been working with a lot of amazing brands over the last couple of years, from Spotify to Hinge in the dating world to L'Oreal in beauty and Crocs in fashion, all of which were really fascinating. And I think through that, we've obviously not only grown a really strong understanding of Gen Z and continue to do so, as well as other generations as part of that. We've had kind of a through line, which has been focusing on Gen Z's like digital well-being and screen time relationships and how young people treat and relate with technology. And in 2023, I want to say October, we released our first of many reports on what we called From Digital Natives to Digital Captives, how the internet changed Gen Z, looking at Gen Z's true relationship with technology and or technology's relationship with Gen Z. And so we I've been in this space for a long time, and I think for me, one of the reasons we're looking at that and always do look at that is not only is it one of the most prominent things in our lives as young people, but I think there's a lot of troubling relationships within that, and looking at how we can shift and change some of the way that looks. And so that's just it's been in the background. It's why for dcdx for a long time we've said our goal is to make the future human, to build a world designed for human connection, which led us to some work we did with Eventbrite in end of 2024, rolling into 2025, really studying and understanding young people's relationship with kind of IRL connection. And obviously, independent of that, I think for a long time we were seeing the rise of these communities and spaces that were becoming really important. Dinner parties, run clubs, game nights, all these different ways young people were gathering, particularly in post-COVID world. But the work we did with Eventbrite was really, really transformational and just in kind of naming that shift. And we helped to work with them on identifying and creating this idea of fourth spaces as kind of this new prominent understanding of like what the evolution of gathering looks like from where we gather to why, right? The shift from places to going to interest-based gatherings that don't really need a place to gather. They just need a common interest. And it was a wonderful report. And as we, again, had been digging around in the space prior and during that, I think we had seen some opportunities that were starting to bubble up, and had been working with a client in the fragrance space at the time that saw that, and was fascinated by it, and asked us how they might be able to launch a fragrance into some of the communities that we had been researching. And so we started around into this and realized as we were looking that there's really no infrastructure behind this world. It's all very disconnected. Obviously, there's ticketing platforms that exist to like Eventbrite to bring people to events, but from how you find these communities and how you connect with them, there's nothing. And so we decided to launch and spin out a company out of dcdx called Offline, which is helping brands discover and activate with IRL communities to really drive growth for the brands that they're that are coming to us, but through this lens of IRL connection, and by creating this more connected world in that way, but also driving and creating a new incentive structure to exist that goes beyond just platforms bringing people on screen. So I know there's a lot, but that was the.
No, I mean, you stay busy. I appreciate that. I'm someone that also stays busy, but I do. You mentioned so many things where it's been really cool to see dcdx's like output of things. There's so many people that collect data on Gen Z and then they don't share it, and I'm like, what are you doing with all that information? And y'all don't do that. And I do appreciate that you have this like element of data transparency. You have this element of functional insights that people don't need to have a stats degree to be able to use it. And there's, even though you do a lot of brand work and you have been doing a lot of brand work, I think there's the undercurrent of what y'all have been doing has been like, how do we understand these humans, right? And how the relationship and the motivation and the decision making is much deeper than just doing like brand research, right? A lot of people are like, brand research is it's just about making the dollars. And that's really cool how y'all have taken that and moved it into a space of where you got really down to some of like the deeper motivation around what Gen Z is wanting, not only from brands, but their experiences. And I do want to get into to what y'all have been working on with Offline. But before we get into that, do you have like a moment where you remember being like, oh, this is a major shift? I know you mentioned working with that fragrance brand, but like, this is a shift where we needed to kind of like wake up and shake out, like, how this is changing Gen Z's relationships, because you all have that benefit of having the data to kind of to feel very anchored in your decisions. But do you remember seeing something completely different and saying like, oh, we got to shift what we're doing a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, and I will say, like, again, all the work dcdx is doing is still going on. We're still doing some really great projects on that, and this is just a separate thing. And so I think the moment we knew and decided that like we needed to invest not only money but time and energy into this space was really like as we started to work with this fragrance brand. I think it was so difficult to find and fulfill like the scope of this work in a way that just should not have been. And so I remember talking to a friend actually, calling them up after I started this project with the fragrance company, and we just like, I think he had pushed me to really look at this as something much bigger than it was, which was like, yes, this problem exists immediately in front of you, but like zoom out and like, this is a huge landscape that is just untouched. And there's really something here. So I think that would be kind of it, but really it's the culmination of like all the different moments in the last year or so that just through understanding kind of where young people are gathering has been such an informative part of that.
I'm really excited to get into this like idea of gathering. Well, not into it. Like we've hung out with your friends. I think we have shared friends at Eventbrite that care about the same thing we do, which is always fun. I kind of wish they were here. About how, again, that value shift of how people are willing to invest their time and their energy in the way they're spending their time, let's just say outside of work or outside of school, has been pushing events and gatherings differently. I know you've probably seen it, and which is why y'all have gotten into this space with offline. We're going to do a whole deep dive on that in a second, but I can just, I can see how your work with brands and your work with like bringing in the data and what we're learning of just the way that people are willing to invest, especially with Gen Z, is just different. People are thinking about their investment decisions, not just like monetarily, but time wise and energy wise, I think differently. I think I've felt that in the atmosphere a little bit. And so that's going to change the ways that we're selling to people and what we're selling to them and how we're engaging with them, and really how brands work with consumers is going to change if people are investing differently. And I know it's kind of like speaking to the choir, but that's what I'm hearing from you as well, as it's not just like where those eyeballs are, but it is a little bit more about the it's how people are willing to be engaged with content or be engaged with the community that's feeling a little bit different. So that's my tangent to take us into what is offline. Tell us about, I don't want to say give us the pitch, but really, how did this, you told us how we got to where we were and you creating offline, but what is it? And how does it expand on DCX's mission of what you do to connect meaningfully with target audiences?
Yeah. So, I mentioned at DCDX, our mission is building a world designed for human connection. And I think when you break that apart, one of the things that we have always looked at, that I mentioned previously, is the incentive structure, right? What are platforms incentivized to do? And it's to keep people on screen, right? They make money through advertising. They want people to, come on screen and continue to scroll because that's where the money comes. And so if we want to shift and get people, like when we're asking people to log off or unplug, like it becomes a really difficult thing because we're essentially going one versus a million engineers on the other side of the screen, which Tristan Harris testified to the Senate a while back. And so I think when we look at like how do we shift that, right? That's where like the premise of how offline fulfills that is coming into play, where we need a way for incentives to flow through a new economy, right? And for that to happen, we need a way for brands to find communities and find the different things that are out there, and also to partner and activate with them, and something that's easy and sustainable to do. And so like what offline is and what we do is we're really helping brands discover these communities and activate with them to drive that growth that they're looking for. And these like really we're matchmaking, and so we're working with these brands to find the right communities to bring to them, and working with the hosts on the other end of the side of the stick to say what kind of brands are going to be most helpful for you in building your mission and building your community, and how do we help you find those. And so that's really the purpose and work that we do at Offline. And obviously we were early on in our journey, about 3 months in, but the traction has been pretty remarkable, and I think a signal of how ripe this time is in the market for this happening, and just continuing to live and fuel off of that momentum.
So you don't have to give me the secret sauce, but I want to get into a little bit of the mechanics, because I feel like someone might look at this and say, well, like, don't these things kind of exist? Aren't there already intermediaries that help connect? Like there's so many influencer platforms, but you all kind of call yourselves more of like a community of creators, community of connectors, whatever you want to really frame it. And not really a talent agency. You're not really an influencer network. But what does this look like in practice, and how it differentiates from what is currently existing in the space? Because I know that you said you were struggling, and you're a smart person. I know this about you, that if you were struggling to figure this out, like there truly must have been a need. So what does this look like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think you made a really good parallel that 10 years ago, the same thing was happening with creators and influencers, right? Social, when people started going big on social media and brands wanted to work with them, how did you find them? Well, you have to know who you're looking for, right? So you have to like find, it's come across your feed, or you've seen them come up before someone's told you about them, so you know where to find them. and then you have to go and DM them one-to-one on Instagram and or YouTube or wherever it is, and eventually you saw platforms start to recognize this opportunity, and you saw the influencer marketing platforms rise up. So I would say on that end, we're taking a similar approach to building this and saying like there needs to be a way to discover, to aggregate all these communities together and then discover them. And then on the other end, how, like, I think your point, like there are a couple different categories in which we're adjacent to, influencer marketing being one, but it's not the same thing, right? Influencers, like, there's a lot of challenges which we can get into on why this category is so different than that, but has some real fundamental distinctions between community builders, hosts, and influencers. And then there is like the talent representation side, which is an adjacent piece to this too, where we see the future of community builders growing into the next, not the same as influencers, but growing into the next evolution of what an influencer is, and who serves to represent the host just as we represent the influencer today. So I think there's a couple sides to that we're looking at, and beyond, but really, like, I think we're sitting in the middle of a couple different categories that really there's a huge white space that's just grown in the last 3 to 4 years as these communities have grown up from the ground.
I do. I mean, man, I hate when I have epiphanies, like when I'm like in a setting like this, but truly framing the idea of like a host or a community gatherer, right? Like the person that's convening these people together feels very different than an influencer. But then on the converse, I feel like there's so many influencers that are like, come on my retreat. Let's go on a trip together. And so I could see how there is some element of a Venn diagram, but I do think that there are some people that are just natural conveners that don't want to have like huge presence, but they have the ability to influence the old-fashioned way, which was like, come talk to my running club, or come talk to my church, come, like come share your brand with my sorority, whatever it is. Right? There's always been those people that are going to have that social influence within their group purely because they are the person, and I'm this person who sends the calendar invite.
Right.
Right? Like, it's just like, you're the person that said, come over to my house, we're going to do baking night, right? Or we're all going to gather at this brewery and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then it turns into something bigger. It almost feels a little old fashioned, but at the same time, it's old fashioned in today's like very info driven, idea driven, content driven world.
Totally.
At least that's how I'm seeing it and hearing it.
Totally. And I think you actually said it well, like influence old fashioned. I mean, influence, I think, has just come to naturally mean influencer today because of this commonality of the words themselves. But like, if you truly break down influence and where that sits today, it's something we've been tracking over time. And a lot of influence has to do with trust. And if trust is evolving in digital platforms because of the fatigue and the overload that's come from influencers, and now you're adding in a whole new world with AI and slop content that's just everywhere, how do you know what you can trust and who you can trust it from? Well, IRL starts to become one of the only true ways that trust can form. And so where do you find that? It comes from these communities that have built up where they're offering that and offering IRL gathering. And so when a brand comes into that setting and works with that community to say, if it's a run club sponsored by Hoka, for that, like the trust that's coming from these community leaders to say, we believe in Hoka, we work with them, we want you to as well. That goes a much longer way, a much farther way than an influencer posting a 3-second story.
Well, and I think you get onto such an interesting point around trust and community and shared value and gather. And like, that's when we talked with our friends at Eventbrite, like the 4-space concept was like spending time in spaces with meaning, right? Like meaning and trust and community. And then we, recently talked with them about the granny core concept of like the value of slowing down, the value of finding people that want to connect around the same things you do that is not related to productivity. And I think that it's so much more community driven. It's also this like concept, and maybe it's because you and I've nerded out about this for so many years, but it's a new form of word of mouth. Like we still think that word of mouth, or let's just say power of the community, is still so much more powerful than so-and-so influencer that's trying to sell you something online. Like, no shade to influencers, but I think that market it's grown so much. It's hard for everyone to be good at building that trust.
Right. Totally.
So if I'm following you, because I do think this is blending a lot of, it's almost like you're simplifying the things that the market of like influence and brand has gotten potentially a little bit into the Wild West and needs to be wrangled a little bit and brought back into like, this is how people actually buy and what they want to buy. Okay. Wow. This is a lot. So I really like where this is headed. And, again, we've both hung out with Eventbrite and all the great things they're doing and kind of like shifting communities and events towards that desire of connection around similar values and interests. What about offline do you think is making more of an authentic connection to Gen Z and more, especially for creators and then community members and community gatherers? Why, I'm not saying convince me why this isn't another branded stunt, but what makes it feel more connected? And again, I trust you because
Yeah.
you have such a good regular pulse on what's going on with Gen Z and the work you're doing with your other company.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say first of all, like I think we're living in a world where this is in tandem and in partnership with folks like Eventbrite, where Eventbrites and Sweat Pals and Partifold and Lumas of the world are powering the ability for community builders to activate their communities in a paid way. And I mean, not even paid, obviously through just bringing in their community members in a kind of organized way. So for us, like it starts with being community builders ourselves. So one of our kind of initial partners in this, Trey, he's a run club leader in Miami, and so he's been building a run club from the ground up there. Understands what it's taken over the last couple of years to build that from a couple of people going on a jog in from a backyard to hundreds of people gathering every week to run, being sponsored by Hoka, being sponsored by Propel, and being sponsored by brands that they would dream about in getting started. And so one just starts with a true understanding at the foundation level of like what it looks like to be a community builder. But we've also been talking like nonstop over the last 3 months and beyond with community builders as well. So I think we have about 1,500 different communities that we've been in contact with in the last couple of months. And so many of them we've had face-to-face conversations with, and just hearing their stories and understanding. I mean, this is coming back to the dcdx thing. It all starts with people, right? And so you have to understand what these community builders and hosts want most, what their pain points are, and like the thing that comes up again and again and again is monetization. And there is no really good way to monetize beyond ticketing. And ticketing is great. Obviously, that's why people like Eventbrite are thriving in this space, but it also doesn't solve all of the problems. Like it might help to recoup costs or to at least get some sort of monetization out of that. But like if you want to truly build your community and grow it into something that's larger than a couple of people gathering, you need another form of monetization. And so memberships like are one way people have tried that, but it creates a pretty big access barrier and kind of moves you into somewhat of a different social club type thing. But brand partnerships become like what people in this space are asking for, and it's just there. So in listening to that, we continued to see that there was just like there's a huge disconnect in both sides of the market, and brands are starting to really invest and jump into this space, and communities and hosts are starting to really like recognize and want that opportunity. But it's like they're screaming at each other from the other side of the void, and there's no path that connects them, right? And so that's what we're trying to do, is just build that connection rooted in the understanding of being community builders ourselves, coming from those worlds, working with these worlds as we're talking with them.
That is just, man, I'm thinking about it's hard enough to convince someone that you don't know, like to buy into something, right? To like show up and do something or to buy the product. And I just feel like this is going to solve all problems because let's use your run club. Like people are already showing up to run around. Like they're already doing the hard part, which is showing up. I don't like to run, so like I would just be there for socializing. But like it's showing up is the hardest part. And I think that is and finding community and showing up in whatever way that looks like. It doesn't always have to be in person, but showing up for the community sometimes it's like making the hardest yes, which is like turning your brain on to be with other people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And after that, I'm thinking about it from the brand perspective. Like this is just a group of people that are already saying yes to showing up. They're already interested in the same thing you're interested in. So it's cool that y'all are sitting in between there and saying like, let me translate for you all and make that connection for you all because you care about the same thing.
Right. And I think it's important too that like there is, so in terms of, I think we had mentioned briefly like some distinctions in influencer and in the host world, right? And one of those is that communities are their product is the experience, right? And so anything that disrupts or changes that experience in a negative way is going to severely impact the longevity of that community. Whereas if I'm a creator and I post something that people don't love, like literally they just go like this and then it's gone, right? And so the when you're at these events, like the partnership, the authenticity of these partnerships matters so much more, because it's truly everything that, like, it if it goes poorly, it's the community's like future at stake versus just a couple followers here and there, right? And so I think the type of partnerships matters so much, and that's why it's not just like finding the right ones, it's also just making that match fit really well.
Yeah.
Because they have to go. You can't have I think I mentioned this on another podcast. Like, you can't bring a vacuum cleaner to a run club and say, let's, everyone go buy this vacuum. It just doesn't make sense, right? But when hope
Yeah.
goes up, it does.
Yeah, and it feels like you have to know what the needs are, the wants are, the desires of a community, and really getting into the motivation of it, of why these people are here and why they're willing to give their time and their energy in that space.
Right.
I really appreciate that you kind of touched on like the goal is longevity, because I do think that like in today's world, we're in a very transactional environment of like, creator posts this thing. We don't really know if they actually use it. I'm just going to swipe away if it's not my thing. Or I just feel like I'm being sold to. It doesn't feel authentic. Whereas I think the things that have actually influenced me, like that I buy online, are like people that I actually trust. That I'm like, you are straight up an evangelist, because we have something in common, and you appreciate it, and you go through the same things I'm going through. And I think that we just got, maybe as a society, got so far into like creators getting into that transactional nature because that's how they get paid. And like, I'm never gonna poo poo on anyone paying their bills. However, you got to pay your bills, right? But the constant selling of things to people is, I think it's gotten to a point where maybe it's starting to erode that trust piece of it that you've identified that is so critical. But then it's just this element of like, we know that Gen Z specifically, if we're going to get into the Gen Z of it all, they've been capitalized on online and being sold to online all the time. And they so many of them are revolting against it because they don't want to be sold stuff anymore.
Yeah. And it's funny. We were just featured in Vogue a couple days ago, and
Casual. It's a casual mention.
it was pretty cool. My mom loved it. Shout out, mom.
Shout out, moms.
So if you are listening, go check out their Instagram post about this, because if you scroll through the comments, it is fascinating to see like the very polarizing reaction to the work that's happening here. On one end, you have community builders who are extremely supportive of this space and wanting to monetize through brand partnerships. On the other end are people saying exactly what you just said, which is, why does this space need to have, like, can the brands just stay away and give us a space to like be ourselves? And I think it's really important. And it's a really, really good point that I'm glad to have seen there. Because it's true. Like, we have been targeted our whole lives, and we have been literally wherever we go, as long as it's on the forefront of culture, the money and the brands will follow.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an unfortunate reality of like the market and the world we live in, which isn't to say that we should be the ones like doing that because of that. But I think it's that, like, the way I'm looking at this space is that for communities to stay in power and to continue to grow, there needs to be some way for that to happen. Like, we've talked with these community builders again and again who have gone from a weekly event to a monthly to a quarterly to a semi-annual to an annual because they can't afford to pay out of pocket for the spaces and for the things to happen here. And so the way we fund this future and the way we create a future designed and built for connection is to build an economy around it. And it is a really like non-emotional, very objective way of looking at it, but that is the only way I see this future sustaining, because we are up against the billions and billions of dollars that are pouring through Meta and pouring through platforms to keep people on platform. And
yeah. And I think that, I don't know, maybe it's because you and I see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. When I look at it, I'm like, it's consumer decisions, right? Like, these brands and companies are trying to influence consumer decisions. They've been doing that since the earliest days of advertising, right? Like, if so-and-so standing on the boardwalk trying to sell tickets to the show, like, sales are sales. We live in a capitalist economy. We just are living in hyper late stage capitalism where everything is an opportunity to sell things. And this is where I'm going to get a little like conspiracy theorist, not against you, but like that's how businesses work, is like when you sell things, you make money and then you invest that to make more money. Like that's just how the business world churns. And I think that this puts, or offline in the work that y'all are doing, puts a little agency back into spaces that were potentially priced out. Like, let's be honest, events and gatherings are not cheap. They're not, even if you're doing something free 99 for the community, there's still time and labor that goes into organizing something for a community or organizing a place for people to be. That I appreciate that you are looking at it from a sustainability and a longevity component of these communities, because you're also reducing the barrier of, again, go back to the run club. Like no one, I mean, I pay a gym to run around, but it's more like I pay for the accountability to run around. That if it's a run club and people just want to get together, no one really wants to be like, I'm going to pay to run around outside in the free earth. So I think that what you're doing is actually providing more agency back to communities. And it's still allowing people to say like, no, I don't want to buy the hokas, but thanks for your sponsorship. And now I'm aware that you exist and there's offerings for me if I want them, but I can still say no. Just like I can say no to any other form of sale that's being tried, like any form of transaction that's going to try to be made online. Like it's no different. I think it's just actually in a weird way giving people more agency. But it is also going to probably put on community leaders and gatherers to like know what's the right partnership to have, and when it does potentially encroach on the trust that exists within a community.
Totally. And I think like it will paint a picture of what will happen in 3 years in this category, is that like this space will grow very quickly and that brands will invest more money and more dollars in the category. And you'll see some of these larger and bigger communities start to monetize in ways that aren't as authentic to their spaces, and they will start to suffer those consequences, as some of them honestly in the bigger scale already are. And so it's going to happen, and you'll see like that same transactional nature that feels so transactional when you're scrolling through Instagram will take another form, but probably feel that same way in 3, 4, 5 years from now in the real world. But where like there will always be those pockets and those areas of culture that feel fresh, that feel new, and feel untouched. That's where community will continue to thrive. And community as a concept, right, is shift. Like we talked about community 4 years ago when COVID was happening, and like our communities were in TikTok comment sections and in Reddit threads. Those communities to this fourth space concept are now IRL and are now meeting in person. That community meeting will continue to shift, but like as long as we can continue to fund connection and in-person gathering through that, like we'll follow community where it goes. But that is the true nature of what we're trying to accomplish.
See, you and I just get along so well because like when I talk with companies and I do trainings on things, I'm like, at the end of the day, people are just people, and we're all hardwired for connection. It does not matter how old we are, where we come from, what language we speak. Everyone just wants to feel connected to someone and wants to feel a sense of community and belonging with others, whatever their interest or background is. Like whatever your flavor of weird is, you just want to know that you're not alone in that. And I think there's some really cool stuff that y'all are doing, is to, I don't say tapping into the weird, but finding the different communities that are niche and have that tight knit community. Because I think that level of influence is really important there. And that sense of community is really important. So I got 2 more questions for you. One, you probably know what it is. We'll save that for the end. But one more thing, because I always like to, we've talked about some really interesting, I think like more meta things up in the pie in the sky and the motivation of consumers. But what do you wish brands and companies understood more about working with Gen Z and like this population in these community centered and kind of in-person spaces? And then in your mind, is there anyone that's doing it really well?
Good question. I mean, I think there's like it's somewhat apparent, but like just stating the obvious, that young people are seeking and really going after connection and in-person gathering. And I know that feels simple to state, but like I think there's just an assumption when you say the words Gen Z or whatever phrase Gen Z, that like you assume it's just like the TikTok generation. But people are craving this so badly, and they're acting on it, and that's like I just think that's really important to recognize, because that hasn't happened in the past. Like that's not what was happening in 2 years ago, and it's not what was happening, of course, in 2020 and 2021. So I think that is really important to understand, and in these spaces, like that's why they're there, right? And coming back to that authenticity point, so like making sure that continues to be the focal point, and everything else can serve as a background. And so I think the best brands that do this well are serving as that backdrop that facilitate the connection and allow it and enable it to happen, but don't like disrupt that in the same way that you talk about content and creators and not wanting to disrupt the experience on screen. And so there are some brands that are doing that really well, for sure. I mean, I've talked about Hoka, I think, as a great example of this. They are essentially just funding communities to fund them and letting them do what they need to do after that. There's no obligations, no requirements for a lot of them, which is awesome to see, and just uplifting and letting the communities return that favor back to them in whatever the way they feel that is done. That's a great example. Running space, but Bandit Running is doing a really, really good job with this. They just had a Grand Prix, which was awesome, that brought together run club leaders across the country. I know Trey was there running and posting all about it and hearing all about it. And it was just a really cool example of like how they've been able to tap into the global running community in that way. But off of running, I mean, I think there's some obviously clients that we're working with that I'm really excited about, the things that they're doing and looking at how they actually bring their brand to life in these spaces, and some more non-traditional things like fragrance or alcohol is a really, I think kind of taps into a somewhat controversial topic, not controversial, but like newsworthy topic in the last couple of years, which is young people aren't drinking anymore. Well, maybe it's that they didn't ever have the spaces to be drinking and that they weren't going there, but they will drink and would drink if it was there. So a lot of interesting things happening there. But yeah, I think it's just understanding that connection is the goal, and how do you uplift that and support that through your sponsorship.
Yeah. I love this. I think you're always working on something smart kid like. So you're one of those smart ones. I always feel like you got an 8 ball that is ahead of everybody else. Which is why I like talking to you, because I like to get ahead of things before they sneak up on me. So Andrew, I love to end every episode talking about our favorite things about Gen Z. You are in the thick of it. You're prime Gen Z, but you work with a lot of Gen Z. You study them. And this has probably changed over the many years I've known you. But as it stands today, what is one of your favorite things about your Gen Z peers?
I think I've been thinking a lot actually about this question as of late in this lens of IRL, and I just think there's like this persistence and a fight that has come to fruition in the lens of like being one of our last reports we did for dcdx in the digital natives to digital captive series was about the pursuit of unplugging, which was then followed, which was like all about how young people tried to unplug but really were not able to, because physically unplugging and mentally unplugging are very different things. And then we had this piece called The Great Awakening, which is like there was a recognition of the desire to get off your screen and go do something, but the action wasn't there yet. And I think the persistence that young people have shown to like overcome those barriers and get out and do those things is just awesome. And again, I don't know if it's like a recognized thing internally that people are saying, I really need to get up and go do this, but it's happening. And so the fact that it's happening is incredible to see. And I think it should be the norm. Obviously, like that's it. It shouldn't be something we have to celebrate, but we should as well, because it's important to recognize that like we're defeating the phones, right? We're getting off the screens. We're going to touch grass, and I think it's awesome. It's just great to see that people are gathering in this way. So I love that that's happening now, and I want it to continue to happen, obviously. And yeah, and I think, can I add one more like tangent to this?
Of course. I'm amazed we got like 30 plus minutes into this conversation. And the first time we mentioned touching grass was 35 minutes into this. But go on. Yes.
I think just this is a question and a challenge for people who are listening, because I think the way that this world and offline things will continue to thrive is actually through measurement. There is no measurement happening in IRL, and I am hesitant in asking this because I think it's obviously like not everything needs to be measured, but for dollars to pour into this space and to fund connection like this, there needs to be measurement. And so I think there's a call to action for people building in this category for how can we measure and how can we create like accountability and kind of some standard of structure in this space. And so we are investing in that and looking into that. But that would be my challenge to people listening and working on this is like, everyone I've talked to that's building around this category, I'm always telling them the same thing is like, we need together to create that, because once that's there will be a lot more dollars that open up.
Let's put our heads together. I love to measure the unmeasurable, or things that people think are unmeasurable. But Andrew, man, you always give me so many things to think about. And there are times when I think back to like our past episodes where you have helped change the way that I think about things. So I always appreciate that you bring such clarity and approachability to talking about things that are kind of heady and insight driven and data-y. And it's a rare breed that we get to hang out like this. So thank you for some really great work you're doing, and kind of, I don't want to say being a voice of your generation, but you really do, or you give a platform to your peers and you help to demystify that with people. And you're being such a good advocate for the needs of your peers, and the people that are around your same age group, and kind of speaking to the experiences y'all are having. And so thanks for the great work you're doing. And as always, thank you for like sharing it, because again, people collect data and then they don't share with the rest of us, and that's just kind of rude. And you're not doing that. You're not doing that.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks for having me again. As always, really appreciate your continued work in this space. I mean, always love to see it. So appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's, I never look at your work and be like, oh, that's a competitor. I'm like, nope, that's just more information for us to all be able to work better together and understand this beautiful behemoth that is Gen Z. Well, Andrew, thank you again. Where can people keep up with the great work you're doing? How would you prefer people connect with you? We're going to link to show notes to dcdx and offline and all that great stuff that you're doing. But if they were to say, I want to learn more from this guy, where would you direct them?
Yeah, go check out offlinetalent.com. Follow us at Offline Talent on Instagram, and shoot me an email at andrew@offlinetalent.com.
If the Gen Z are emailing, which I think we're learning how to do, which I love.
Gotten you'd be surprised.
I know they can do. You email me back. You're Gen Z. It's just not every single one does, and that's okay. Well, Andrew, thank you again. It's just always fun to hang out with you. So
Likewise. Thanks, Megan.
Hey, we're the Payroll Baddies, and our mission is to make payroll fun and relatable.
And call out industry when we hear it.
You gotta call it out. You gotta call it like you see it. But we also gotta shine a light on all those unsung payroll heroes out there, making sure we get paid.
Yeah, those are the real payroll baddies out there, and we love sharing their stories and showing them love.
With gold chain and everything, baby.
By the way, SAP is the best payroll out there, and if you don't like it,
get out.
All right, y'all. What a conversation. Truly, every time I talk to Andrew, I walk away with about 10 new rabbit holes to explore. But here are just a few key takeaways that I think we can all carry forward. First, IRL is the new influence. Gen Z isn't swiping and scrolling. They are showing up. Andrew's work through offline is helping brands meet people where they're already gathering. Run clubs, dinner nights, niche meetups. It's not really about all these mass follower counts. It's about meaningful presence and connection. 2, trust is traveling faster through community. We talked a lot about the difference between influencers and hosts. Hosts don't chase clicks. They build trust in real time. If you're trying to reach Gen Z, think, how can I become part of the conversation, not just the content? 3, digital fatigue is real and Gen Z is doing something about it. DCDX's research shows that the majority of Gen Z feel worn out by trying to keep up online. And the movement towards fourth spaces is actually Gen Z's response to that exhaustion, and a powerful reminder to choose where we spend our energy. 4, community builders need support and not just clout. A big theme here is community organizers aren't influencers, but they hold real influence, kind of that old-fashioned kind. They need infrastructure, partnership, and respect. So if you're a brand or a company, think about how you can show up in a way that fuels but doesn't extract from these communities. And 5, authenticity is a responsibility. It's not just about vibes. One of my favorite points that Andrew made is that in real life, there's no skip or next button. So if a partnership doesn't align with the values of the group, it can fracture trust within a community and the relationship with that brand. If you're going to show up, be real, be relevant, but most of all, be useful. If you want to keep up with Andrew, and I really suggest you do, he's doing great work. So head over to offlinetalent.com or follow at offlinetalent on Instagram. You can also connect with Andrew directly at andrew@offlinetalent.com. We'll be sure to include all of that information so that you can stay in touch with Andrew in the show notes. As always, thank you for tuning in. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to reflect. What kind of influence do you have or want to have? And where is your community gathering these days? Okay, now that you've had literally 1 second to reflect, we want to hear about it. What stuck with you? What will keep you thinking about what we talked about in this episode, even after it wraps? You can share about it on Spotify, in the listener comment section, or you can follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. This truly does help more people find these conversations and learn along with us. If you couldn't tell, we've been having a blast this season, and we still have a few more months of new episodes to go. However, we are really always looking for new timely topics and guests to feature. I'm all ears. Well, technically, I'm all eyes in this sense, but if you have a suggestion, share your thoughts using the form on my website, meghanmgrace.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram at Meghan M. Grace. I couldn't do this without the Gen Z team behind the scenes that brought this episode together. This episode was produced by Callie Waters and edited by Leah Kramer. Thank you again for stopping by. Let's continue this conversation, and we'll chat soon.